we're back. Episode 3. I would say third time's the charm, but I feel like episode 2 was really, I felt really happy with it. Like just everything that we covered, and I got a lot of awesome feedback. It made me really happy to have people say, I love what you guys are talking about, and it feels very authentic and it was meaningful to me.
People like us.
People like us. Thank God. We're not the only ones that think each other are funny.
Thank God.
Thank God.
Yeah.
And several of the comments I got were about rooting for the name Fartface. So
Are we sticking with it?
Well, so I thought maybe we could revisit, because we just kind of glossed over it the first episode, but we like the name I like the name Fartface.
Katie likes the name Fartface.
I love it.
I came up with Fartface, though, let's be clear.
She did, and I'm going to tell that story. So Alicia and I's friendship, and I thought this would be like relatable to a lot of people. That is a nickname that we came up with. For us, it's much bigger than like a silly nickname. It really means something, or it passes a message to the other person. So I'll give an example. Like, we're both kind of yogic and mothers and maternal, and we love each other. And so for the most part, when we call each other on the phone or when we check in, it's very like, how are you doing? What's going on with you? Do you have space for me to share something with you? Like, it's very kind of like therapy speak a lot of the time, because we care about each other. But on the days where you have been fucking drugged through it and you feel like shit, but you know you just have to get your stupid face in the stupid sun and try to do something for your mental health, on those days we call each other and super monotone, we go, what's up, Fartface? Do you want to walk or what? And it always makes us laugh, because you're telling that person who is a huge part of your support system, I'm not well. I don't have any energy for like niceties or trying to, pretend this day is anything other than a shitty day. Will you be with me and will you walk with me? And that's always that we call each other Fartface when it's a day like that. And the other person immediately knows, like, all right, let's get out there.
Fartface.
Let's go Fartface. Let's get out the door. So that's why I liked it. All secondarily, I liked it because of alliteration. I'm a really big fan of alliteration. I try not to use it way too much in my own writing, but like, Big Booty Betty or like Fartface, like the repetition of a certain letter, I think is really fun. And then thirdly, I think I was really hoping we could differentiate ourselves. Like, we could name this like talking about, midlife with Katie and Alicia, or there's a lot of
midlife mavens.
But
we went with Fartface.
I think a somewhat intentional differentiator. Yeah. Like, we don't take ourselves too seriously.
No. This is all fucking ridiculous.
This is all ridiculous and hard, and we don't have all the answers, and we're going to be really honest about the places we don't have the answers, but anything we have learned we'll pass along with as much humor as we can sprinkle on top.
And I also think like the reaction of a Fartface, because I call my dog Fartface too. And she just has this like ridiculous underbite. Like she looks a little bit like
her pity face.
Maybe she doesn't have all the right genes or chromosomes or whatever. Right. And it's you are just a Fartface.
Right. Yeah.
So
exactly. Yeah. So I think the original agreement was we had to get more than 50 views in order to keep the name Fartface. But we never said like on what platform. And so if you combined like Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, I think we have something like 800 views.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. So the people have spoken. We're moving forward with Fartface. Officially welcome to episode 3 of Fartface.
It's real. It's happening.
It's really, really happening.
Yeah. And now we're going to make merch. Now we can make t-shirts.
Yeah.
With Fartface. So all of that, I thought.
The Fartface Club.
The Fartface
Join
Club.
our club.
Please join. We would love to have more members. One of the things I thought parlayed interestingly into the importance of a name, or you and I talk about a lot, words and word association, and how meaning, critically important and meaningful and different meaningful they can be for different people based on their life experiences. And I finally looked it up. I reference this all the time. I know you've heard me say this 5 times, and I never bother to look it up because I don't remember things like a file catalog the way you do. But this author, Brene Brown, does a ton of really cool like research and is interested in the human experience largely, but also grief. She researches a lot, shame, bravery. So some really cool core tenets of the human experience. As she was doing that, she started realizing a lot more how different cultures and different spiritual tenets or teachings use different words, and how they really can make a huge difference in how somebody receives the message or is able to understand the message. And so I always think of this one conversation I had with my friend Ben, who, was like a big reason why I finished my book, The Intuition Game, because he stayed on me and was like, you've got to write about this. You've got to journal. So I respect him, and he was a big part of my life during that spiritual awakening. But we had this conversation one time and we were talking about human nature, and it was just kind of like an existential conversation about human nature. But I was coming at it from kind of like a more optimistic vantage point. He was coming at it slightly more pessimistic. And then he used the word morality. And as soon as he brought up the concept of morality as a way to understand people or measure people, I got really bothered and like my feathers ruffled. And I think it was, or I know it was, because within Christianity, Catholicism, this concept of morality is oftentimes so like it couldn't possibly be more
tied to a sky daddy.
It's tied to a sky daddy who is like the judge and jury.
Yeah.
But also I'm having perimenopause brain. What is the word for doing the opposite of what you say you're supposed to do? Hypocritical.
Yay. Came to us.
Word hypocrisy. So the hypocrisy of religion made me dislike and not want to even try to understand his point, because he'd used the word morality. And after we talked through it a little bit, he was like, Katie, I think of you as someone that is very much connected to her own morality. You think a lot about how your actions or your words will impact other people and what the fallout could potentially be from anything that you do or say. And I'm like, oh, well, that's true. And he's like, yeah, that's all I was saying. But he'd used a buzzword that bothered me. So anyway, it made me think of Brene Brown. So her book is called Atlas of the Heart, and she explores the importance of language in understanding and navigating human emotions and experiences. And the book emphasizes that like naming the emotions and experience gives us the power to understand them. And language is crucial for connection. So yeah, you could understand it based on your own language all by yourself. But if you want to have connection with somebody else where you're talking about it, kind of agreeing upon what the vernacular is can be imperative.
On the meaning of the vernacular, right? So many people take religious texts or any text at all and pull their own derived meaning from them. And there can be, someone can read the same sentence or paragraph, let's say, and take different meanings from it based on their own lived experience and their own morals. Morality is a very individual thing. And words are words. Your expression or what you take from those words is definitely inside of you.
And so if you are looking to, I don't know, start to, as a collective, get on the same page. I think about this a lot.
Shared meaning.
I think about this a lot with like the difference between Republicans and Democrats and all of, we saw there was such a funny era of crossover during COVID where people that had been considered liberal and were always really suspicious about vaccines. That's kind of a part of like the hippie mentality, to question, to want to turn to nature, things like that. But then that same group of people became the advocates for just following the program in case it helps other people, right? And who knows in hindsight, like what was the right response and what was, could have been better or something. But it was so funny how they flip-flopped, and it made me realize, it was a moment for me where I was like, we really are all the same. We really do all have very similar ideas. And if as a collective, we could get a little bit better about having shared meaning and shared vernacular, I think we could agree on things a lot more, because that little debate with Ben, we were saying the exact same thing as each other, but it was a tiny bit different tone. And then there was one word that we got stuck on. So I thought that was an interesting thing to bring up, because as we're doing these podcasts, we're talking from like, I talk sometimes from growing up Christian and having God labeled names for things. And then you've got a lot of your yogic verbiage. And so I thought I would just put that out there, that if something we say sounds right, but there's a word that you're like, oh, I don't agree with that word, just explore that, because you can replace the words we use with any synonym of your choosing. And today we're going to be talking about
Today's episode is brought to you by the word suffering.
Suffering. Yeah. And I think I just looked up. So I had like a couple of little, you love Nietzsche, right? But like to live is to suffer. To suffer is to find some meaning in the suffering. Or Hemingway, we are all broken. That's how the light gets in. I really like that one too. And so however you want to think about suffering, that's what we're going to be talking about today. And just sort of what our experiences have been lately, how we have suffered, and then how we've tried to go through the steps of acceptance and understanding and non-attachment and moving through it in the places we've been successful, which I certainly haven't been successful in all the ways that I am experiencing suffering in my life right now, but it's something I think is valuable to talk about.
Well, and I think that's a common theme that brings most humans together.
Definitely.
Is suffering.
Definitely.
And it's very, I mean, suffering as a word, going back to that, can mean different things for different people. But I think there's the root of suffering and how most people struggle with it is very unifying.
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah. And do you think sometimes, so as like a buzzword, I think suffering, a lot of us are really hypersensitive to Gaza right now. And hypersensitive, I'm sure, isn't even the right word. Like, it's appropriately sensitive. But I sometimes will be experiencing something that really feels like a big ache on my heart. Like I can't breathe, like and then I will say to myself, you're not suffering. You're not being bombed every day. You're not. And I kind of think that's not a very healthy thing to do, is to compare, right? When you're trying to understand yourself.
Well, I think if one of us suffers, we all suffer a little bit. And I think that that's also normal for humans, right? And that's why so many people so deeply care about what's going on over there, because we are not separate.
Right.
We are a collective organism, humans that live on this planet, and we should all care about other people suffering, and it should feel important to us. Those people and those entities that are wanting us to separate from that and to turn a blind eye to that, I think that's like foundationally one of the problems of our human race is that we think we're separate.
Right. And
we're
that not only do we think we're separate, we're being told that that's a part of the system. Like, in order for that
genocide is necessary.
Right. And well, and just like for the powers at play. So I think it's basically just the billionaires, right, are the powers at play. For them to continue to run things and stay in power, we have to feel separate from each other. Because I've been seeing people lately, you know, with the No Kings protests and stuff, talking about, I think I'm not going to get it right, but it's the movie about the ants, where the ants realize that if they all rise up against a common enemy, even though they're teeny tiny, they're way more powerful. Yeah. And so I think we're kind of starting to become apparent to all of us that we are, you know, like it was a dumb example, COVID and vaccines, but it's like, we really all do have all the same common concerns, all the same desires and wishes and dreams, all the same, not the same suffering, but the same experience of having suffering in our lives. And yeah, it's scary for them, for the powers at play, to think about us getting on the same page, using the same lingo, realizing it's not about politics, that it's like we're the ants and it's time to go.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I know when we first started talking about what we were going to talk about today, we talked about suffering and fear. And I think fear plays into a lot of us getting behind what's going on. Yeah. Right. So a lot, I think of, you know, and this is getting like really deep into politics and, you know, what's going on in the world right now. And people are going to have different thoughts on this, but I really believe that our government is trying to keep us fearful and stuck. And when you're fearful and you're stuck, you comply and you allow things. Totally. You like, whoever has the solution, like, save us. Like, things are really bad. And I have been, that's why I love yoga so much, because I truly feel like there's so much noise. There's so much propaganda. There's so much confusion that if you have a practice like yoga that allows you to, you know, take a pause, come into your body, come into some stillness, get some clarity, and not try to like solve all the world's problems, but go through your day with a little bit more groundedness and a little bit more centeredness and clarity yourself. Yeah. You don't make decisions out of fear. You make decisions out of being very grounded, and even on a very small level with, you know, and I like to look at it very small. So even when you wake up and you make a decision about how you're going to spend that first dollar of your day, or what kind of food you're going to eat, or how you're going to interact with people, because fear breeds more fear. And if you go out into the world very fearful, then you're short-tempered, then you feel very anxious, self-protective. But if you can kind of put the fear aside, and, you know, we'll talk about suffering too, because then we want to talk about that. I think they're very tied.
I agree.
And you take a pause and you come into your own purest form of energy within yourself.
Yeah.
And you are able to navigate the world a little bit more softly in spite of all those things. Like, you don't want to bypass them, but you understand they're going on.
Right.
You do your best to understand, okay, that's going on, and I'll do what I can about that.
Yeah.
You can't do a whole lot, but you can go through your day very grounded, very present, very soft.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is like the antidote. That is exactly what they're trying not to have us do. They want to keep us confused, fearful. They want to keep us medicated. They want to keep us feeling like
compliant, like
something's wrong with us.
Yeah.
And if they keep us kind of dysregulated, then we'll just be like, well, whatever you say, fix it. Like, this is all a mess, you know? But if you come into yourself and you can walk through each day in the world just a little bit softer and a little bit clearer and a little bit gentler, right, it's almost like a fuck you to all that.
It is.
That's what I think. I love it. And
it's
I like,
giant fuck.
and I'm
it's
saying
anarchist.
It is. And I've been saying a lot to my yoga classes. I'm like, this is the rebellion.
Yeah.
Us sitting here and being calm and breathing together and moving together. This is exactly against every single thing that our government is trying to get us to do.
Strengthening the network between us so that our connection and our bond, we can't move like ants. We can't move all together.
Yeah. There's a rebellion building.
I love that. I love that. And when you're talking about the fear and sort of acknowledging that your circumstances have not changed when you leave yoga class.
No.
You're still out of work and panicked about it. Or someone you love is very sick and you're panicked. That did not change. But the fear versus, you know, releasing the fear as a vibration in your body, to me, is closed heart versus open heart. So when you're fearful, your heart is closed because you're in this protective mode. But when you can just sort of release it from your body, that shit's still there and that didn't change and you still have to approach it. But to have an open heart makes all the difference. And I meant to look up this creator's name. I will tag her. But I saw somebody say something really cool on TikTok. And she was saying, what if instead of thinking about as humans, we come down from somewhere, we have this experience on the planet, and then we go back up somewhere again? Visually, what if you think about it more like a giant portal, right? And so as a soul, you come down and you pass through this portal of the planet. And as you're passing through, the way that you vibrate, the way that you interact, the way that you speak to others, the way that you share or love or hurt or whatever you choose to do impacts the earth, because you're part of, you know, this huge collective that is all behaving in certain ways. And so the earth changes you and molds you and shapes you as you have the opportunities to choose and decide how you're going to react or how you're going to respond. But then conversely, you are impacting the earth. And so you're either passing through that portal, making the earth a better place than where you found it, for being brave in the moments of fear and finding a way to stay open-hearted so that your vibration is lifting, continuously lifting the vibration of the collective. And then there was one other thing I heard that was so cool. It was something like, if you have, I can't remember how they did the study, but they did some study on energy and the impact of energy. If you have, it was something like 1,000 lower vibrational beings or objects or something in a space, and then you bring one high vibrational, that it's almost the opposite of one bad apple spoils the bunch. One truly positive, grounded, happy,
I saw that too.
Can really make a huge impact. And so I loved the thought of that too. When you get a little stuck in, but I'm not changing my circumstances by doing this, maybe not, but you are having a bigger impact than you'll ever realize.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because energy never dies. It only changes form. And fear breeds more fear, and love and compassion breeds more love and compassion. Energy is contagious, like you're saying. And so if you just think about it simply, like and also I would say the calmest person in the room is the most powerful. Yeah. The one that is the most grounded, that is the softest, like you're going to be drawn to that. Although when we look and, you know, our experience in corporate, like I would not say that that's necessarily true with people who are running big corporations.
Yeah, it's like the loudest, most egomaniacal asshole in the room.
And there's a dysfunction, an energetic dysfunction going on at a very, very foundational level, especially I think in our country. But even let's say, if someone does something like really simply nice for you, the way it makes you feel in your body, you're just like, wow. It's like, and then you then have that energy, and then you go out in the world and you're a little softer and you're a little sweeter. And it's like, it takes so little to, well, I wouldn't say it takes a little, the work is to stay grounded.
Yeah.
And to try to stay soft. And the other thing I encourage my students to practice a lot in yoga is we come into all of these different postures, and it's like how to be engaged in life, but without creating all this tension.
Right.
So you can still be engaged. You can still be doing challenging things. And if you're relating this to yoga, you're engaged, you're present, you're embodied, but you're not like embodied,
rigid,
you're
white
like,
knuckling.
You are like in it, but calm, and soft, but or powerful.
Like in it, but Jello, right? And Jello is the most power. Like, it's unbreakable. Like Jello might not be the right, but like something wiggly and squishy and agile and malleable is the strongest.
Yeah.
Right? Because you can't fracture it in the same way you could fracture glass or stone.
And it's almost the difference too between like masculine energy, which I know that we were very much in our masculine energy when we were really in the hustling of corporate. And now, us trying to explore more of a feminine approach to life.
Definitely.
Really dropping into trust and trying to increase our energy and being more of a magnet, knowing things are going to come to us at the right time.
Right.
If we're patient, there's like, the world needs more feminine energy
Definitely.
Right now. Like a lot of this angsty, urgent, hustling.
Grab it, chase it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's just a huge imbalance.
I agree.
And we're feeling that with the amount of fear that we're all feeling.
Right.
Because it's energetically, everyone's feeling it. Energetically, something's just off.
And there's just too much unknown. And we feel it because we're, energetic beings. Yeah. We feel that something is coming, that change is at hand. And the unknown, I think, is what causes the fear in large part, right? Just not knowing what's coming next is terrifying. And to me, the antidote to fear is faith. But that's a huge buzzword, especially for people like you that weren't raised with it, or people like me.
You want to know what I think of when you say that?
Yeah. What did you think of?
George Michael. And I want to sing, gotta have faith, the faith that I gotta have faith.
That is good. I love that.
And you're probably thinking of Sky Daddy.
I am thinking of Sky Daddy because that's how I was raised.
I think of George Michael.
Right. And it's really very perfect. It's very, really reflective. Yeah. But I think we talked about getting to an age where, especially if you were a mother or were a caretaker, or had anything that was your God, right? So for us, it was, for me, it was raising my kids. Like that felt like a religious experience, or the most important thing I could be devoting myself to. Like devotion is a big part of faith. So where are you spending your time? What are you devoted to? If you're devoted to your career, that's kind of what you're wrapped up in, if it's your kids. And so at this stage in life, when you do kind of have the midlife breakdown, awakening, whatever you want to call it, and you start asking those big questions, what does it all mean? Why am I here? Am I going to feel happy with how I spent my time? You do kind of have to reorganize where do I want to be devoted in my life? Is it to my soul's purpose? That's what I came up with. But then when you become fearful, even though you're aware of that thing you want to be devoted to, you're not sure it's going to show up to meet you. And that's where faith has to come into play. Otherwise, fear kind of grips you and you're like, you're delusional. What are you thinking? All the happy thoughts in the world don't mean something's going to come to you, but I think they do. I think as long as you're open, something is going to come. It might not be packaged the way that you expected, but the things that are meant for you will come to you. And there's a faith in that, right? You have to believe that that's true. And so I feel like it's sad for our country. There are two ways to keep humans behaving in a controlled enough way, like where they still have free will, but shit doesn't go like chaos, right? And the two ways are either like Native Americans were storytellers. And so when they would tell stories to their communities about the right way to behave and why it was important to come from a place of love and why it was important to be harmonious with Mother Earth and why it was important to be to each other and be like upstanding good people, they were storytellers. And that's how they communicated that message. And that's how they kept people behaving in a way that could be harmonious. And then I think they had also some defaults for, if somebody is not able to do that, I think they would like ostracize them and stuff. So there's obviously
Native Americans.
Yeah.
Actually, I've heard the opposite. Two quick things. I want you to finish your point though.
Yeah.
So how would you feel if we swapped the word faith? And this is really funny because we were talking about meanings and words with hope.
Fine.
Okay.
Fine.
Because I was just thinking, it's like fear.
Yeah.
Fear squashes hope.
You're right. Hope is a better
and faith. It's
counterpart.
Like, how do you stay faithful, but how do you stay hopeful?
Yeah.
And I can definitely I don't know how I stay faithful. That word to me, I was like, I don't know.
I think for a lot of people it would be wonky.
Yeah,
I like
so
hope. That's fine.
Keeping hope in my heart is something that I feel very connected to. And as a daily practice, I have a staying hopeful, keeping hope in my heart, optimism in my heart, possibility in my heart. And what was the other thing you were saying? Oh, Native Americans. Actually, I've heard the opposite, that when somebody had, went out of norm or acted out of community or acted out of tribal order, they actually came together in support. Like maybe there were times where they were ostracized, and I don't remember the exact Native American tribe or
right.
practice.
I'm sure it was different tribe to tribe too. Yeah.
But what's really interesting, and I'm going to kind of maybe segue here, and hopefully this tracks. But I'm going back to school to be a marriage and family therapist, so I'm learning all of the theories and what a lot of Americans struggle with mental health wise. And the top thing that Americans struggle with is anxiety. And
which is fear, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Dysregulation.
Yeah.
Just being like, what the fuck is going on, and not feeling hopeful.
Right.
Losing hope. And so when I looked into, it wasn't part of the studies, but when I was like, I wonder which cultural group in America has the least amount of anxiety. Can you guess?
I would guess it was Native Americans.
It's Asian Americans, actually. And Asian Americans have the least amount of anxiety because they are the most familial and community driven culture.
Yeah.
Like they stay within their family.
Okay.
So they have a lot of support. They have a lot of community.
Yeah.
People are not so individualized. In American culture, we're very individualized. We're very alone in what we do most 100%. Of the time.
Yeah. I don't have family that lives within 100 miles of me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in Asian culture, not only are they very community based, which is one of the reasons that they don't struggle as much, but they're also have very, very strong, what was the other thing? It was community based, and then a very deep connection to mind body. They don't treat the mind like we do in most of Western society as just the mind. They believe in the mind body connection, which is, yoga, Chinese medicine, Indian culture, all of that. And I thought it was Hinduism and Buddhism,
Qigong. And
all of it is a lot of what they believe in their cultures is very much a mind body practice. And so that was really validating for me, because everything that I'm drawn to is all about the mind body practice. And then it's just another support for if you are trying to alleviate suffering, anxiety, you need to focus on the mind body. You need to come into community. And then to bring in the Native American stuff, I've been obsessed with that book, Braiding Sweetgrass. And I haven't mentioned it yet on the podcast.
You haven't, but maybe obsessed. We could read a little bit or something, because it does.
I suggest everybody read it. It's a Bible for our times. And one of the other reasons I think we feel so fearful and disconnected and anxious is because we have completely lost our connection to family, to community, to nature. And you were talking about, come from up above and you come through this earthly plane, and you were saying what you give and what you take. And in the Braiding Sweetgrass, they talk about this idea of energetic reciprocity with nature. And I know that in trying to keep my hope body, my possibility body alive, I find that hope in nature, in my connection to nature. And
do you ever stand with a tree and think about how as you're exhaling, they're inhaling, and as they're exhaling, you're inhaling? It's pretty hippie, but it makes me feel great.
I love it. Yeah. Or, I'm obsessed with birds now. And when I'm in the present, so almost every single day I go on a walk, I go through this little eucalyptus grove, and I take my earbuds out, and it's as I'm walking up to the eucalyptus grove, there are so many birds in there, and I swear they hear me coming, and they're like, she's coming. And I'm like, guys, I'm coming, and I walk through this little eucalyptus grove, and they are all it's almost like cheering me on. When I walk through it, I'm doing my little dance, good morning, everybody. Yeah. And it's
that connectedness feels really, really important.
And my heart opens 10 times. And I was and there's just, it's so purifying and grounding to me.
Yeah.
And in that moment, with my feet on the ground, breathing fresh air, with the birds doing my little cheer dance as I walk through my eucalyptus grove, I'm connected. I'm my heart is soft.
And just to validate your reciprocity, I was watching some clip of a woman that had done a big ayahuasca journey or something. And she felt visited by Mother Earth herself. And her immediate reaction within this journey was to start apologizing profusely for what we've done. She almost made me cry. She had a lot of like shame and guilt and felt the guilt of everyone. And I guess she felt stopped by Mother Earth's energy. And she said, but look. And she showed pictures of you celebrating with the birds. She showed pictures of us gathering together and breathing. She showed pictures of us like seeking and trying. And she said that builds her up so much more than the destruction that has been done, because love is stronger than greed or whatever else. And so, yeah, I think the reciprocity is definitely in place.
Yeah. And I think we do need to live. I think part of our confusion and part of our disconnection is how disconnected we are from nature. And there is a way for us to live in better energetic reciprocity. And, you know, I think the first step is just an awareness of nature around you and of really slowing down and of becoming more attuned to it. Because whether it's stopping by a tree and putting your hand on a tree, or whether it's, you know, standing in front of the ocean and just like breathing in the salty air, or, you know, sand in your feet in the sand,
getting out of your head and into your body for a minute. Yeah.
Or putting your hands in dirt, you know, planting a plant, planting a garden. And there's I'm going to tell a quick story about kind of giving an example that like a lot of the time we feel like, oh, humans are just like cancer and we're ruining everything, you know, but Native American culture does teach us that nature does need us to help balance it. Like just like when they returned the wolves back to Yellowstone, how like that triggered, you know, that whole story of how it triggered, there was like too many deer, they were eating all the plants along the riverbanks, and it just, the wolves not being there, even though they were killing things, really threw off the biology. So when the wolves returned, all of these like wildflowers returned, and all of this, the balance came back, because we do need things to keep things in balance. And so as long as
we're respectful in the way that we are present,
don't take too many. So, you know, humans are supposed to be here to keep certain animal populations under control. We, you know, the burning, like we should be doing some burning to keep the forest from getting too dense.
We could be doing it all a lot smarter.
Yeah, there is a way. We are needed here in some capacity to interact with nature, but it's like we are just, you know, we'll see a patch of strawberries and we'll go pick every last strawberry as a human. But Native Americans would never pick the first strawberry that they saw. And they would only pick half. And that's like the, you know, how do we live in better balance? And I think that type of example of just awareness and connection and energetic reciprocity should flow into everything. Like,
but they were able to only pick enough strawberries that they needed because they had the faith or the hope or the probably just confidence that there would always be enough strawberries, because that hadn't been introduced to them yet, that there were finite resources, that
but
it was.
Knew. That's why they only picked half. They only took the, you know, and then in the years when they didn't have enough, they went without. You know, and they learned that
how to dance with nature. And
there's a dance, and you know, there's times when you have to go without
and not be fearful and not let fear make you pick all the strawberries.
Exactly.
So the faith hoarding, the faith or the hope is super important. And the only other thing I was going to say about faith being a weird buzzword, which I know it is, that there's, in my estimation, there's two ways that you can keep people behaving in a harmonious way. And the one is like the storytelling. So the passing down of all of those stories and all of the, you know, all of the Greek mythology, all of that was meant to paint a picture of how a human experience can be an enjoyable, worthwhile experience and not be miserable, right? But if you lose that, and you lose the connection of storytellers and that familial lineage, then the alternative is religion. So if you're not telling the stories that will keep people, you know, not fearful, but reverent about the things that are important and, you know, the role that nature plays and the impact of your actions, if your actions are negative, if you don't have that, then you have to start creating a rule set within religion. And the way to ensure that people follow the rule set is fear. And so that's where, you know, if there's one that is like storytelling and predicated on hope, the alternate, which is probably easier to roll out en masse, is here's the rules and then terrify people and invent this concept
of control.
Yeah. And so I think it's just a good way to think about, you know, our concept and redefining as a collective how we want to regulate ourselves. It would be really nice if it got back to storytelling and passing along these beautiful ideas about why it's important to live harmoniously. And we could kind of get rid of organized religion altogether. But but there are practices, there are beautiful practices that are a part of some religions that help people stay embodied, like you said, or help with the mind-body connection. But in my experience, in a Western experience, especially with Christian, it's been pretty fucking toxic.
Yeah. And very fear-based.
Yeah.
That's I grew up without any kind of organized religion. And I learned it through some of my friends' families. And it was always very fear-based. And I was like, I was turned off almost immediately when someone tried to scare me into believing what they believed. And I knew at that moment in my heart, I'm like, this isn't for me. The thing that wants to scare me into complying, I was like, that's weird.
That's weird.
That's weird.
So if that was our exploration of fear and hope and how you create a system for yourself that allows you to acknowledge fear when you're feeling really fearful and it's affecting the way that you're showing up out in the world and moving towards hope instead, then I think separately but related would be suffering. And I guess if the opposite of suffering is like to be blissful, to feel blissful or joyful, right? Would you agree?
Peaceful. Yeah. Same.
Peaceful. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's a practice, right?
Yeah.
So we work to disconnect from fear, right? Disconnect from fear and come into our truth and come into moments of, in this moment, if I'm not projecting too far into the past or back into the future, in this moment, everything, for some of us, not all of us, in this moment, everything is okay.
Right.
And from that place of okayness, moment of okayness, then I'm like, okay, you invite hope and possibility into your heart. And then as you're finding hope and possibility into your heart, then life happens and you get exposed to suffering.
Right.
Right. And so it's like fear, hope, suffering. And you kind of go back and forth. And the suffering is the human condition that no one can escape.
Yeah.
Suffering is like where fear is something that I feel like is more objective.
It does, and it feels like more of a choice. I do feel like I can choose to switch out of a fearful state. Yeah, the suffering is like, because I guess it's more related to fear, in large part, you're inventing ideas about what you're fearful about. Yeah. Largely, it's because you've got like some catastrophic thinking happening or something, because the tiger is probably not actually chasing you, right? But with suffering, you a lot of times cannot change your circumstances. And of course, it's all relative. And suffering could be that you have to commute in the heat of the summer in a car that doesn't have air conditioning, right? And like that could feel like suffering, but it's real and it's uncomfortable and you're overheating, or it could be something horrible like you're being bombed. Yeah. But because of the human condition, like the suffering is just suffering. It's all relative.
And I think how you decide to digest the suffering and sit with the suffering, or bypass it, which doesn't serve you either.
Right.
And I think if you were to, what were my options? It's sit with the suffering, bypass the suffering. And some of it is self-inflicted suffering. Right. So it's like, if you follow Buddhist traditions, one of the things is, Buddhism wants you to identify suffering in your life and especially your role in your suffering, which I think is really important. Right. So it's like, that's right. It's me. I'm the problem. It's like, okay, I'm doing a lot of that myself, but then there's some suffering that you just have to sit with. And it's like, I think you have to sit with most suffering a little bit and then decide, okay, is this just suffering? Right. What type of suffering is this? Is this suffering that I'm inflicting on myself? Yeah. Is this suffering that was inflicted on me that I need to process? And I can't remember the third one I said, but the sitting with the suffering. And I think people or you bypass it, right? So if you're like, oh, that's happening to me, and you're like, try to toxic positivity yourself through the suffering, or, because then the suffering's just going to keep back and revisiting you. Yeah. But I think if you sit there with it and befriend suffering, I think in the human condition, befriending suffering and maybe even befriending fear a little bit in some ways, because
it's trying to keep you alive. Like we have fear plugged in to keep us alive when there's a tiger in the jungle, but we just don't need it nearly as much as it pops up now. But you're right. It because it feels uncomfortable, because suffering is a discomfort in the body, you want to drink it away, smoke it away, pill it away, and of course we're not talking about if you're actually dealing with chemical imbalances, you do need intervention in lots of cases to help you regulate. But I do think learning to sit with it until you understand it and then can assess it a little bit better. Like I certainly used drinking to escape negative feelings, and it never made it better, but I'm definitely not enjoying the sitting with it part of my experience.
And yeah, some of us that really practice that sitting with suffering and making sense of it, it's a lot.
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. And if you become hopeless while you're in the middle of suffering,
that can happen. That's the dark hole you fall into as you lose hope.
Mm-hmm. And that's where it all goes really negatively. And for me, just because of the way that I'm wired chemically, I didn't experience that until my hormones changed in perimenopause. So I think
the losing of hope.
Yeah. I mean, but I'm so much more honest now too. I think really, as much as I see myself as not having suffered before, I think I was disassociated from my body completely, disconnected because of trauma that was unresolved. And so when something like suffering would come up, I didn't feel it in my body because I didn't live in my body. I lived 10 feet above my body. And so wouldn't you know, doing the work and learning how to come back into my body, trust it as a place of safety, reside there right at the same time as some of my hormones are shifting, and that kind of anxious charge that kept me going is falling away. And so I'm not able to speed through it or run past it in the same way. It really is sitting in it. Or I think I said to you, somebody told me one time I was going through something really hard, and he said, you gotta wear it like a wet wool sweater. You gotta put it on and wear it and own it and claim it. And that's the only way to release it. And so I think it's healthier the way that I'm doing it now, but I'm definitely not having any fun.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of Sad Sister.
I was wondering if you would want to talk about that, because I think different examples, even suffering might be a word that people are like, I'm not suffering. I have a roof over my head. Well, but it's like,
well, gratitude is definitely, is an antidote to suffering. Gratitude, hope. Gratitude, I think, is sometimes more easily accessible than hope.
Yeah.
But gratitude, definitely softens suffering a bit. And I know that we were talking about this beforehand, the getting rid of suffering, I think, is also an interesting thing to consider, because I don't think you ever get rid of it.
Right.
For me, I relate to befriending it more. And so I'll quickly give you guys tell you who Sad Sister is. So after my mom passed away 9 years ago, and I will say I've always I tend to run a little depressed. So I've felt like I know suffering well, and I definitely have sat with suffering for most of my life. And it's been loud, the suffering feeling, this dark feeling in my body has been there. And whether you call it depression or suffering or whatever, it's there. And so after my mom passed away, I had a very challenging relationship with my mom. She was an addict. And when she passed away, I really kind of fell into kind of a dark night of the soul, I call it. And I know your experience. What are you calling your experience?
I think mine was a spiritual awakening, but I had a healing journey where I was confronted with the fact that I had to go back and heal childhood trauma that I thought I was done with. It was like, no, you're not done. It lives in your body still.
Yeah. And so whether it's a dark night of the soul or a healing journey, or you just decide to finally kind of deal with your shit.
Yeah.
I tried a number of different ways to kind of make sense of my childhood and my relationship with my mom and grief and all of that. And my suffering body became very overwhelming and loud after my mom passed away. And so I tried a number of things, but one of the things I tried was an MDMA journey. During that journey, a number of things came up, but one of them was I had this moment where it was my physical body sitting across from my soul body. And on the right side of me, I had my happy sister. On the left side of me, I had my sad sister. And we were all separate. And this was before I even knew anything about internal family systems or parts work or anything. Right. It was very interesting that I split into these different beings.
While under the influence of the drugs and and you had a trip sitter with you.
It was a medicinal experience. I wasn't dancing or doing anything. I was laying down with a mask over my eyes.
And you had planned it and talked about what you wanted to go through and what you wanted to adjust. So it was like therapy mixed with.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm very pro psychedelics. Yeah. But because psychedelics can help you access part of you subconsciously that you can't access through talk therapy. And it really opens you up too, because once you actually, and this is an aside, but during that, I felt a lot of love from my mom. And so during that journey, I really felt like, oh, my mom loved me, which is something that I've really struggled with, like whether she loved me or not. And so during that, like I felt like a lot of compassion for her, which was really hard for me to access. And there was things that I wanted to feel that were very hard for me to access that felt very true during that journey. But I was able to come out and be like, oh, I've actually felt that with every cell in my body during that journey. So then I was able to come out and be like, okay, I know what that feels like. So I can stay in the integration after you do something like that is to actually practice staying attached to it every day.
Find your way back
to it.
And
it is like to stay connected to it, you have to integrate it. And people who don't do the integration part are missing out. And that's a whole nother topic. But anyways, so I have sad sister, and all of us, the other three of us were like, sad sister's a fucking nightmare.
She's a party pooper.
Got to get rid of sad sister. And so coming out of that,
voting her off the island, that's kind of sad.
No, it's super sad. But what that highlighted for me is this idea of like, just let it go. Just let it go. Just get rid of it. Just forgive. Just do that. And it's like, no, like I have a suffering sadness that is part of me that I need to befriend. Like we're all being mean to her, and nobody heals with shame. Nobody heals in isolation. And it took me a while to kind of put all those things together and understand why I like was so stuck in this suffering body. But the sad part of me is like, my mom was depressed, like her mom was depressed. Like, you know, there's mental health that runs in my family that is part of my like trauma, you know, intergenerational trauma body. Like that is something that, you know, and I was taught from a very young age, like as I was raised, like nobody was happy. It was totally dysfunctional. Like there was no practices of like safety or joy or hope or anything. It was like fighting and dysfunction and emotional dysregulation and abuse. And it was like, you know, so coming out of that, it's like, no wonder I've got the sad sister body, right? And it's like, so when, you know, opening up to that sad sister and trying to help that part of my suffering body, just like, how do I live with that? Because we're not getting rid of her. Right. So what I learned is like I sat with her a lot and I asked her like, what do you need? Like, how are you feeling? And when I feel her get activated, I'm like, okay, you know, it's not just be like, sit down and shut up, you know? And it's like, she doesn't like that. She needs someone to be nice to her. Like most of us, right? When we're suffering, it's not like, just forget about it or just get over it. Yes. You need self-love. You need compassion. You need understanding. You need to sit with that. And even though I get sick of her, like I'm sorry, sad sister, but it's hard to sit with suffering, but I know that she's much quieter when I take good care of her, and she's much softer when I honor her and I validate her. And I'm like, girl, it's been hard. I understand why sometimes you get a little triggered and things are a little bit hard. And so through that exploration of sad sister, and that was like 6 years ago or 7 years ago now, and I'm still integrating her. Like I'm still learning, you know, I only found her when I was like 40 something. And so it's like, we're 6 years into our relationship, me and sad sister.
And you're learning it.
And we're learning about her.
And it's like, we were talking about this, I think, before we started too, but we were talking about how valuable it is just to have that acknowledgement that suffering is real and that you came by it honestly, you know? And so you're doing that with her, but in the practice of reading you know, like Buddhist scripture or teachings or whatever you would call it, like coming back to that place where there is a validation and an acknowledgement that suffering is real. It's a very large part of the human experience. We all have it. You don't have to talk yourself out of it. You immediately start breathing. You immediately feel a little bit better. And if you can you know, I love to think that you could find a place or a temple or a teacher or a friend that could always be the person to acknowledge that and validate it for you. But more likely you have to do it yourself. This is so silly, but there's this one Taylor Swift lyric that's, you're on your own, kid. You always have been. And for some reason, it's like, fuck, that's depressing on a lot of levels, because we do really wish we could count on people. But the faster you realize that you're your own best friend, you're your own twin flame, like you're your own biggest ally and advocate, the faster you get there, then people are frosting, you know?
Yeah. And I do think you have to acknowledge some of that, but I also think that you do heal in community.
Yes.
And so whatever form, you do not want to bypass the foundation of being your own best friend, of being your biggest cheerleader, of making sure you're not saying mean things to yourself, because community will never fix that. Like the relationship you have with yourself is super important. But I think also because I have felt very alone because, you know, my family system, like, and getting back to kind of like Asian cultures and how they don't struggle with anxiety as much. And it's like, I don't have a stable family system. I don't have anybody to call. And now that I'm learning through all of my schooling, you know, to even not have one reliable adult that I could call on growing up, that has stunted me emotionally. Like, you know, and so to learn how to be your own favorite person, this or that, like it really getting to that place really does start with having emotional attunement and having security as a child. And if you don't have that, then it is a very hard healing journey to get to the point to where you're like
up into the role where you can do it for yourself. Yeah.
And then the tricky thing is if you are not loving yourself, then other people don't know how to love you. And so it's this weird thing of like, you're suffering, you're low vibrational suffering. You don't know how to love yourself. You're saying mean things to yourself. You're feeling hopeless. And then all you need is community, but you're so low vibrational that you're like, and so traumatized and so blah, 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 that you like try to go out in community, but you can't even really be in community.
Right.
Because you're like, so
it doesn't feel good. Like you're not bringing an open heart. So it doesn't feel good to, you're not in a place to receive anything from anybody else. Yeah.
But I will say that when I was going through all of that and I was really struggling to find community because I was just feeling so shitty, yoga. So I do feel like when you are in a room with people, even though these people might not be your tribe or whatever, and I hate that word tribe too, because it makes people, I think, some people feel excluded when they don't have one, because not everyone has like a tribe that they're part of. And a lot of us want that. But when I'm in a yoga room and I am sitting next to somebody, even if I don't know them that well, and we are collectively breathing and moving and co-regulating together, that feels like community to me.
Definitely.
So, I did most of my healing in a yoga.
I agree.
In yoga.
No, I did too.
Shavasana.
It feels like church to me. I've always said like yoga is like church for me. And this is like, I realize I have an odd sort of connection to a lot of this, but in biblical teachings, and I'm not to the point where I would remember what verses was, I could look it up later, but there's a concept of when two or more people are gathered together in prayer, God is there and you can count on it. Yeah. And so there's something about, just all you have to have is the intention, shared intention, and then God is present, right? And we don't think of God as like a white male man in a robe, the way, religions sometimes want you to think about it. But I think to your point, anywhere you can be with people that have a shared intention, the intention is to find open-heartedness, the intention is to find grace for yourself and for others, and to just feel good and to move through this life in the most positive way possible. If yoga is not your thing, or you don't like it, or you don't have a yoga studio near you, if you've got one other person that wants to go out and go for a nature hike, and the intention is to appreciate nature, the intention is there in place, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Any way that you can, nature is always a really good answer. Yeah. And how to find people to co-regulate with. Anytime you're co-regulating with something, I feel like it's healing.
But that's probably like bird watchers. That's probably a method of co-regulating.
If you do not have, if you are not currently a bird watcher, you should be. And also I wanted to mention a little plug for my club.
Yes.
That you are in, that everybody is in, that listens to this podcast, that comes to yoga,
right?
That will buy Katie's book when it comes out. Like, you're part of a club, and it's the Self-Love Club. And we are really nice to ourselves.
Yeah.
And we take ourselves on nature walks, and we do fun things for ourselves. We send ourselves lots of compassion.
Part of the self-love too, I think, is just having a sense of humor about it all. Right. Like, wherever you can, if you can give yourself grace and find something funny about the situation, that has saved me a million times. Like, finding, because humor really is one of the most intellectual components of being a human, is to be able to see humor in things. Right. And so I think that's a big part of self-love for me, is finding the humor in things.
Yeah. And also how you talk to yourself, like a morning pep talk, like, hey, bitch, good morning, you badass, beautiful thing. Right. What do you want to do today?
Yeah.
Oh, you want to go do that?
Yeah.
Let's go do that.
I know. Mine has totally changed. I used to say hideous shit to myself, hideous shit. And so now I am,
I still do sometimes, I'll be honest. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a pretty strong negative self-talk that I have to.
It takes a while to unwind for sure. And it takes, again, with the suffering, it takes some desperation and some real isolation to, it sounds sad, but to give up on anyone coming to save you and to come to the place where you go, I have to fucking save myself. Like that's it. And the suffering got you to the most magic realization of your life, you know, because when you learn to love yourself out of whatever got you there, probably some desperation, it's life-changing.
Yeah. Yes. I will say though, foundationally, humans to feel well or to thrive, they need to be validated, seen, and heard in some aspect. And yes, you should be good at doing that for yourself, but it all is really helpful if you can be in relationship and container with somebody who validates you and sees you too. Every once in a while. I will say that like, you don't want to rely on that solely, but we are social beings and we are wired for connection. And whenever we can get connection. And again, I just keep on coming back to yoga. Like yoga is just a simple practice of validating, seeing, hearing each other. Because when you're in a room breathing with people, you're all the same. You're all the same. You're all there for.
And some poses are hard and some poses are easier and some make you feel stressed out for some reason and others you'd stay in all day. And you're riding the waves over the course of an hour and a half or whatever.
Right. And if you're going to a performative yoga class, it's a different experience.
It's a very different experience.
But, you know, but if you're being guided,
it's yoga as therapy,
an inclusive way, and it, you know, and in a way with you're leading with self-love and intuition and taking what you need for your body and, you know, not comparing you to other people in the room physically, then I think it can be that way. But we get in our own way with that.
The self-acceptance first so that you can be in community in a way that feels good.
Yeah. So fear and suffering.
So fear and suffering. So we talked about how to approach suffering. We sort of touched on, you know, not wanting to ignore it, not wanting to devalidate it and talk yourself out of it, how that the acknowledgement is a really important part of it. And then what are the other tips for how to approach suffering and to sort of integrate with it, do you think?
Well, just like shit happens, like suffering happens, you know, and to sit with it and understand your role in it.
And then the moving through it. So like you mentioned something a minute ago, but I feel like during my spiritual awakening journey, I went through something that just felt like elation, like lightning in a bottle was my body. Like it just felt incredible. And I feel like I was shown what it is to vibrate with 100% love and hope. I felt like nothing could touch me. Like I was untouchable. Like no matter what happened, the universe would catch me. You know, I would look for signs all day, every day that validated what I was saying, which was, I am fiercely loved by the universe. Nature sees me and is singing to me like sweet songs about how special I am. And I really was just in that practice in a beautiful way because I was kind of cracked open during that time in my life. But I think the point of it was, and the point of like psychedelics sometimes and having a temporary experience of what it feels like to vibrate with love and gratitude and the understanding of others and empathy and all of that is so that you can kind of try and memorize what it feels like and find your way back to it. And so you don't want to push suffering away, but if you can swell up what hopefulness feels like in your body, where does it show up in your body? Where does it feel good? How does the sunshine help complement a part of that, or connection with another person and having sort of your pheromones or whatever bouncing off of each other? I guess that would be the integration, is how can I acknowledge it and then give myself grace and then kind of find a couple of steps, not out of it, I don't know, but like towards something that feels a little bit more tolerable.
Yeah. So in a somatic practice, like you're saying, so if you were to go on a couple days or have a day that just felt full of suffering and you have lost connection to hope, right? And we're not talking about just the thinking, but in your body, it feels like it's suffering.
Despair. It feels like despair.
Yes. And so your heart hurts, your stomach hurts, you hunched over, your body is somatically suffering. And the antidote to that we talked about would be hope, or maybe gratitude. I don't know. So the somatic
whatever you can get to.
In somatics, we have something called an anchor, an energetic anchor, or a resource. And so what the somatic practice would be is to think of a time in your life recently where you felt hopeful, or you felt, it was hopeful, and my menopause brain dropped the other word.
Okay.
Gratitude. Yeah. Hopeful or gratitude, where you felt very grateful or you felt very hopeful. And if you couldn't think of a time, you would visualize something that you would feel very grateful for about, like receiving or being in nature doing something, or hopeful, right? You'd be like, that would make me feel hopeful.
And it can be ridiculous. You can be like, okay, imagine tomorrow the hottest man you have ever seen in your life walks in shirtless and hands you a check for $1 million. Imagine, really like soak that in. And what does it feel like in your body?
Then you take some breaths, you try to relax your body, you visualize yourself experiencing that moment of hope or gratitude. And then you sit with that feeling, visualize it,
memorize
you bring
it in
your whole
yourself.
Body there. You picture yourself, what you're doing with your body, whether your feet are on the ground, whether your hips are sitting on a chair, whether the sun is on your skin, how you hold yourself, how you're breathing. And then you start to manifest that energy in your body. And then you just really pay attention to where the energy is. And then with somatics, the interesting thing about the brain is the brain will believe anything you tell it.
Right.
So,
and we call it delusion, but it's like, but it's great.
But it works for you and against you. So if you're saying mean shit to yourself and say it enough, then your brain thinks it's true, even if it's not true.
Right.
And if you say really positive stuff to yourself over and over again, your brain thinks it's true, even if it's not true. So a daily practice, if you're feeling really deep in suffering, of coming back to a meditation where you really allow your body to feel into hope, to feel into gratitude, and whether you feel that in your heart, whether you feel it in your third eye, whether you feel it in your feet or your hands, and you sit with it and you remind your body how you feel in that moment to create that energy. And so the more you do that, the more your body remembers it, and the more then your body can access that feeling to balance stuff out. But I wanted to mention a book that is has a really, really good practice. It's called Mind Magic.
Yeah, you talked about that last time, I think.
James Doty. And what I love, did I talk about it? Okay, I'm sharing it again.
You just mentioned that you loved it, but
I love it because it's exactly what we're talking about here. And there's a really cool story that he shares in there about Jim Carrey and how Jim Carrey, and this is all about using somatics for manifestation and to bring more positive stuff into your life. And so he talks about the science behind this. And essentially, if you have a practice where even if you don't currently have something in your life, whether it's a feeling or a thing, and you meditate on it and embody the feeling of actually receiving it every single day, your nervous system fine tunes so that you subconsciously make decisions that take you in that direction. You're like reprogramming your subconscious. And there's a story that he tells about Jim Carrey. When Jim Carrey came from Canada, like as a new comedian into LA, he didn't have anything, he didn't know he was going to be the Jim Carrey that we know
living
today.
In his car.
Yeah. And he was just, probably working at coffee shops, just trying to make restaurants, whatever, trying to make it. And he had a practice of, he wrote himself a $10 million check, put it in his wallet. And every single day he'd pull the $10 million check out. And I don't know that he might've gone to the bank and pretend to deposit it, but he would feel in his body what he would feel when he got a $10 million check. And he did it over and over and over again. He also had this other practice where he'd go up the top of Mulholland Drive and he'd sit on his car and he'd look out over Hollywood and he would imagine, again, visualize getting part after part after part in movies. And even though he wasn't getting any work, he was he would just go through the motions of oh my gosh, thank you so much. Wow, I'm so excited. And he would move his body.
Really
he would
play through
he
it.
would play through the whole thing. And there was a moment, and there was the Ace Ventura Pet Detective, Dumb and Dumber. There's one more. There was 3 movies that came out, The Mask or something like that.
Ace Ventura, Pet Detective.
Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, Dumb and Dumber, and maybe The Mask. And he got $10 million for all 3 of those movies.
Amazing.
Kind of cool.
It's so cool. And I will say again, with the words, if the concept of manifestation or stuff has been robbed for people because I'm sitting way far back on it. If that is something that feels irritating, I think it's been bastardized a fair bit. So let's acknowledge that.
Yes, I hate manifestation. I actually got really frustrated with manifestation, but because I'm so into somatics and I really related with his,
it's real. It just got stolen by some people on the internet that are trying to sell you systems for manifestation. And that's horrific.
Buy this $10,000 program.
Straight to hell.
Yeah.
So, but it's a real thing. And it's scientifically proven that energetically, when you're in a place of receptivity, and we've talked about that as being in a more feminine place where you're open to receive, open-heartedness, where you're being creative, you're being imaginative with like, what could this life hand me? What would I enjoy the most? And how could I contribute or give, something joy to people in his case, and humor, and, don't get hung up on the word like manifestation or whatever, because it's real and it works. And I believe that story worked for him for sure.
It's keeping your hope body alive. Yeah. Which is the antidote to suffering and fear
and paralysis, and the paralysis that goes along.
We just come full circle. See, we are our biggest fans.
Yeah, we gotta be. But I think that, that's what everything I wanted to explore about suffering is just the relationship to fear, how real it is, how paralyzing it can feel, and that the component of hope or faith has been bastardized for a lot of us, but that's necessary. And so call it whatever you want, but find your way back to the thing that you cling to, or the thing that helps you find the good feelings in your body and that place of hopefulness again. And I'm happy because I have been in a lot of suffering, the more suffering that I've ever been in my life, because I think in large part, I'm trying to come out of my cocoon or something. So I had this the dragonfly analogy. And so I've been trying to metamorphosize, and it's been hard and scary and painful, like scary to do that, and to leave a place of financial security and feeling kind of, really proud of myself in that way. Like that, it meant a lot that I had enough savings that I would never have to borrow money from anyone, or having a good credit score. Like those things meant a lot to me, and I had a lot of self-worth. And as I've tried to switch into what do I really want to do? What is my soul's purpose? What did I intend to do when I kind of signed up for this gig? Finding that has created suffering for me because of the fear and because of the unknown. But I would never have convinced you to start this podcast if I wasn't suffering. It's only because I felt like, what if anyone else is feeling this way and they don't have this person to have this conversation with? And so it's a really good example of, not to be overly it's miserable. I'm totally validating how miserable it is, but it has squished me and pushed me and ripped me and molded me into something that's a lot closer to what I wanted to be. I'm not all the way there yet, so there's still fear that I'm fighting, but it does have its purpose.
Yeah. And when you are making great changes in your life, I don't think that if you really broke down and looked at most people's transformation, if it wasn't messy and scary,
if I was comfortable, I would watch Bravo all day.
Yeah.
I might not even leave I'm my most sedentary when I'm comfortable. And I think a lot of people, it's like lighting the fire under your ass. There has to be some sort of an agitating factor. And either it's that you're searching for more meaning in your life, or you want your life to look or feel differently day to day. You want to provide a different example for your kids. Whatever it is, it's going to be an agitating factor that moves you towards that. It's never going to be like, oh, let me just recreate because of energy. Because in order to change things energetically and to change matter into something else, it's destructive first.
Yeah. And a lot of the times everything needs to break down and break apart so it can be rebuilt back better. And I also, in times like these, I also really think about Shiva, the Hindu god.
Yeah.
And so there's 3 Hindu gods. There's Shiva, there's Brahma, and Vishnu. Shiva is the god of destruction. Brahma is the god of creation, and Vishnu is the preserver. So Shiva is the god of destruction, but for the purpose of transformation.
Right.
Which I really like.
Not just out there breaking shit for no reason.
Not just breaking shit. And things have to break a lot of the time to break apart so they can rebuild back better. And I want to pause quick. This might be a good place to end.
Yeah,
but there's
I love
it. When Things Are Falling Apart. So this book by Pema Chodron, When Things Fall Apart. I'm a book girl. I'm a book nerd.
And you said this was your Bible when you lost your mom.
When I lost my mom. Yeah. And there's a part where she says, when things fall apart, maybe they're falling back together. So like I was saying, I really love this book, When Things Fall Apart, Heart Advice for Difficult Times. It was my Bible after my mom passed away, and it helped me a lot. And it says, we might feel that somehow we should try to eradicate these feelings of pleasure and pain, loss and gain, praise and blame, fame and disgrace. A more practical approach would be to get to know them, to see how they hook us, to see how they color our perception of reality, see how they aren't all that solid. then the 8 worldly dharmas become the means for growing wiser as well as kinder and more content.
Circling back through it over and over again. And it's the practice.
Yeah.
Right. It's in the practice. I love
letting
that.
it be.
Yep.
Hopefully that makes sense.
I thought it was great.
Okay.
Love you, Fartface.
Oh, love you, Fartface. That was a long one.
It was a long one. Okay, out.
See ya.
And we're out.
See ya.